Hey gang, welcome back for another comic book interview. Todd Nauck is a mainstay of the mainstream comic book industry with long and extensive runs at both DC and Marvel, and even before that, doing quite a bit of work at Image Comics in their heyday. He has seen everything in terms of the modern comic book industry, the rises and the falls, really big explosive runs and, short miniseries, one-shots, variant covers, the whole 10 yards. He's got an incredible attitude and a ton of experience, and he lays out a lot of that here. It was an absolute joy to talk to him. He's a good friend and an amazing part of our industry. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. Todd Nauck, the man, the myth, the legend. It is so good to see you. I was just saying before we started recording the call here, I miss everyone from the conventions, and you're one of those people who is like a little bright light when I see you in Artist Alley there. You are always got a big smile and an amazing, crowd of people there, and you are kicking butt. And you have been doing this for, I don't want to put too fine a point on it. You've been in the comic business for quite a while now.
27 years. I started when I was 9 years old, and so
nice. When you were 9, yes,
maybe
right.
a little older than that.
Okay.
Maybe another 12, 13 years older than that. Now I think about it. When you get to this age, math, numbers,
senility is part
blurry.
and parcel of the whole thing. 27 years, that is amazing.
27 years, yeah.
And consistently, like, you have just been plowing through. Have you ever not done comics? Like, was that your first sort of job out of school, or what's the kind of pre-build there?
When you first graduate school, you do whatever job you have to, so I was working at movie theaters, grocery stores, all sorts of things. Tried to get my art career going. So I did like t-shirt and brochure designs, because that's why I studied at the Art Institute, commercial art and graphic design, back in the early 90s when I was 7 years old. And and because they didn't offer a comic book art class, and I didn't feel I was ready to make that move from Texas, where I was born and raised, to New Jersey for the Kubert School. So I thought, I want to stay local. I was like 18, 19 years old, so I was like, I want to stay local. So I'll go to the Art Institute. Whatever I learned there, I'll apply to comics.
And so you were already focused on comics right from the start.
Age 14, I remember the night I realized this was what I want to do for the rest of my life. A year after collecting comics, a classmate of mine in my freshman year, I was a freshman at age 5. My freshman year, he said, "Hey, you're always reading comics, you're always drawing characters. Have you ever tried to make your own comics?" So that day, when I got from school, I took some printer paper, folded it in half, like 4 sheets, and wrote and drew an 8-page comic over the course of the rest of that afternoon and into that night. And it was so much fun. I knew, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Now I'm going to teach myself how to do this.
Oh,
so
that's amazing.
The Art Institute, when I realized, I took a year and a half after I graduated high school before I went to college, because I thought I can break in on sheer talent alone. And after a year and a half, only being able to go to Dallas comic book conventions like once or 3 times a year, because they did these Dallas conventions, the Dallas Fantasy Fair, every March, July, and November. It's like, I'm not making the contacts as deep.
Those are more like just collector shows, right? Not really, publishers.
Well, they would have professionals there. They'd have local people like Carrie Gamble. It was awesome. And I remember one year they had Jim Lee, early young Jim Lee. Sure. And there was a Marvel editor who would come out every year because she was from Texas, Renee Witterstatter, who was editor on the John Byrne She-Hulk and and a number of other Marvel titles. So I got to see her over and over and over again, and she got to watch my portfolio grow. But by the time she offered me my first gig, I was already in art school, because I realized after a year and a half, I was 19 years old, realized I'm just not, it's not happening for me as fast as I need. I'm not getting better fast enough. I need to go to art school and see what I can learn there to try to propel myself further faster, because otherwise on my own here, just teaching myself anything.
Right.
Especially with the limited resources of the late 80s, early 90s, internet
you don't have the internet. Exactly. I mean, now I think we take for granted how much stuff is at our fingertips. When I think about, art tutorials, cooking, like all kinds of things that I'm learning so much faster because it's just so accessible, and you're able to build on those skills so much faster. But even before that, so rolling back a little bit further, you were an avid comic reader growing up. You were a big collector. What were you into? What were your favorite titles?
I started off as a Marvel zombie. It was
Yeah.
all Marvel all the time. Started with Secret Wars. Bought a 3-pack of Secret Wars comics
Awesome.
because I recognized some of these characters from the Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends cartoon, which was kind of my gateway to the greater Marvel universe. And it's like X-Men. I remember them from those 3 episodes of Amazing Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends. These are the characters I'm interested in. So I picked it up because I saw it was a 3-pack, had issues 7, 8, and 9, so I could see the cover to issue 7, which had Wolverine and Cyclops on it, and issue 9, where all the heroes are racing up the hill to attack Galactus, and I recognized Wolverine, and at that time I couldn't remember all their names, so it was Eye Laser Guy, Claw Dude, Metal Man, and so yeah, I had my nicknames for them, and so it's like, I gotta get this, and once I cracked into those 3 comics, I cut out the little coupon from issue 9 to subscribe to Uncanny X-Men, and that was my jam. I did start getting into DC with the Wolfman Perez stuff, so Teen Titans and Crisis on Infinite Earths was kind of my gateway into reading DC comics in the mid-'80s.
So when you subscribe to X-Men, who's drawing it at that point? Is that Paul Smith?
John Romita Jr.
John Romita Jr. already. Okay,
issue 192, I believe, was my first issue.
That's awesome. I love that some of those things are so indelible. Like I remember the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man I bought with my own money. Like I had other kind of random comics, but that was one that I bought myself, and it made a huge difference because it was like, no, this one's mine for real, for real. You know what I mean? It's my gift or whatever. And so you were collecting steadily from that point forward?
Yeah, well, it was random. I mean, I was in a small East Texas town, so whatever 3-packs were sold at the Target store, whatever I could find on the spinner rack at the grocery store, which I loved going to for grocery shopping because it's like, see ya, Mom, I'm heading to the cereal aisle where the spinner rack is, and I just stayed there and I just spin through and look at all the titles and usually would walk away with 1 or 2. And so I bought whatever I could get a hold of. Sure. So I wasn't really able to collect runs until later in my teen years when our town got its first comic shop, and then I started filling in gaps in my New Mutants, X-Factor, X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man runs, and I actually then was able to start building the runs of the titles I really liked.
When did you notice the difference between following characters and starting to follow creators? Like what was that shift over? Do you recall?
Yeah, I think it was kind of gradual because when I was a kid, all comic art looked the same to me. I think that might be the case for everyone because
you're just starting off, you're just excited about the characters and the stories. Yeah.
And then I started noticing there are certain art styles that grabbed me. And the first one that I really noticed is like, I'm a fan of this dude. Now I liked Mike Zeck starting out because he drew Secret Wars. So I was into Mike Zeck and John Romita Jr., so because they were the ones I was seeing regularly. But then when Rick Leonardi did a fill-in issue for Uncanny X-Men 201, which was technically the first appearance of Cable with Baby Nathan, that there was such energy and fluidity to his movement of his characters, and the I forgot who inked him. I'm not sure if it was Wills Portacio or Dan Green, but whoever inked him, it was such crisp lines. It was so different than what John Romita Jr. was doing. It really just popped at me, and I was like, so he was like my first
one where Storm is fighting Cyclops to see who's going to be
who will lead them.
Yeah, so awesome. It's funny that now that you mention it, that Rick Leonardi, there's something a bit about, I can see that influence in some of your early stuff. Absolutely. Like I wouldn't have pegged it if you wouldn't have said it, but now that I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. That I can see little elements of that. And Leonardi's got such cool flow to his artwork, and composition is just killer. And he's one of those artists where he doesn't, over render. Like it's just pick the right pose, pick the great composition and sort of go for it. It's awesome. That is awesome. Nice. I love this stuff. This is why I do these interviews, because I love seeing where that primordial kind of element comes into it. So who else was jumping out at you? Rick Leonardi and
well, I have my Mount Rushmore, my top 4 major influences, the ones that really influenced me. I've been inspired by so many artists.
Sure.
But influence, like the really key influences for me as a kid in the 1980s was Rick Leonardi first, then Arthur Adams, who I think has influenced so many of us from 85 when he really got big to present day. Yeah. He's a mega legend. And let's see, Walter Simonson and Alan Davis. Though I don't think people would really see the Simonson or especially the Alan Davis as much in my work, but it was I was poring over that and studying that so much as a kid that, I think I've evolved into my own style beyond that. But those are like the four that just really wowed me. And it's like, I want to be like them.
Right. I mean, Alan Davis is like, feels like an artist. Like he's just stuff was so solid, is so solid. I mean, he's just brilliant in every way, right? Simonson's stuff, that graphic approach and the incredible, like the nice thing about someone like Leonardi or Simonson, like from across a room, you can see their stuff and you instantly recognize it. It's just got such visual, distinctive quality to it. There's nothing else quite like it. And that stuff is awesome. Nice. And so obviously those are all Marvel artists at the time, so they've got a huge
and X-Men related artists. They were either drawing X-Men comics or X-Men related comics, specials, annuals, things like that. So those were the books I was gobbling up.
My brother was collecting all the core kind of X-Men stuff, except I was buying Excalibur, so I was definitely the Alan Davis kind of fan. But the nice thing is we shared our books and we would read them. I was really crazy about Spider-Man. I love the Avengers. I love getting all the weird kind of all the supernatural stuff too, like Moon Knight and Blade, or just whoever. Like I loved all those kinds of the weird books. I love digging back through, of course, Conan the Barbarian and Man-Thing and all that kind of stuff. But it was just like such a weird mix for me because our touchstone was the Handbook of the Marvel Universe. So we were always obsessed with because you couldn't afford those back issues. It was impossible. They were way too expensive. So you just read these profiles and you go, oh, it all makes sense. like there was some grandiose plan that all fit together. At least that's the way it made it seem when you read those profiles.
I love looking at those profiles just to I kind of learned from those for like how to draw figures, like studying the like they're almost like turnarounds for me. And so I really just love those for the art as well, just because they were these unique shots of each character, whether it be for the Marvel ones or the DC ones. And I just would pore over those and just study them and like, how did this artist build his pectoral muscles or biceps? I would just. That's kind of how I started learning anatomy, kind of learning it through. I think a lot of us young artists do, because how else are we going to learn? I think so many of us start off teaching ourselves by, mimicking what we see in the books.
Absolutely. And so when you went into the Art Institute, that was when you started doing obviously formal art training. So you're learning like formal perspective and figure drawing and stuff like that. So were there any anatomy books that stood out to you, or processes or people that helped you when you were in school?
Yeah, let's see. Our life drawing instructor, she was big on Bern Hogarth. And that was pretty much the only one we were taught from. There was no really, I don't really recall learning or getting any of the Loomis or Bridgman books. It was all Bern Hogarth. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting. I haven't heard that. Normally it's a mixture of different, anatomy books, but just having that one kind of focused look. And the Hogarth stuff is really distinctive, like the crazy distended and intense amount of musculature on those figures. Like everything is just pulled so taut. That's really neat stuff. Cool. That's good to hear. I love hearing, again, all the different kind of influences and the stuff that works its way into it. So you go to school. How long do you go to art school for?
The program was 2 years. So January 91 to December of 1992. And I was out the door with an Associate of Applied Arts degree.
Nice. And then you immediately start putting together a portfolio and started
actually, well, I was hitting the conventions, every 3 months or every 4 months there in Dallas. And in March of 92, so I was about to turn 21, so I was 20 years old at the time. Renee Wittersetter, I showed her my portfolio, and it's like my fifth time to see her. And she said, I'll buy a 1-page gag off of you for what? Because my stuff was crazy cartoony at the time, far more cartoony than anyone would consider it now. It was like, because as a kid, I had a hard time drawing the human face. I couldn't get the cheekbones and the nose right. So my solve to that was just don't draw that. Right. So I did funny animal stuff. I did Ninja Turtles and Peter Porker's Spider-Ham and Usagi Yojimbo, that kind of stuff. Because it was like, then I don't have to deal with my weak area.
Sure.
And, but a convention just prior to that, so it was probably the November convention, I met Stan Sakai. It's like, oh my gosh, Stan Sakai is here. Usagi Yojimbo. Got a chance to meet him, showed him my portfolio of funny animal stuff. He flipped through it and he said, this is cool, this is good, this is really funny. And he closed my portfolio and he gave it back to me. He goes, just want to give you some advice. I'm like, please, you're a legend. Anything you can impart upon me. He goes, funny animals is a very narrow niche. consider drawing traditional superheroes, and that widens your target. And so I get home and I'm like, well, why am I only doing funny animal stuff? And it's like I had to do that soul searching moment. It's like because I'm avoiding the thing that's difficult for me, even though I'm studying this stuff in life drawing and whatnot. It's just it hadn't gelled for me yet because I wasn't really investing in that in my comic book type work. And so it's like I gotta stop avoiding my weak area and let's hit this. So I started. It's like I stepped away from funny animals to focus on traditional. Have never gone back.
Oh wow.
Still love Ninja Turtles. Got to work with a little bit with Spider-Ham, but once I started working on the thing that I felt was the most difficult for me, things started to change. But it was super cartoony, like definitely for the What the Mad Magazine type stuff. So she said, "I'll buy a one-page gag off of you." That became Mutant Mishaps that ran in the August issue in 1992, issue 21. It was the back cover, and that was my first published work while still in art school, but it'd be another year and a half before I'd get my big full-time break into the industry.
Cool. So you were in school, you got that little tiny thing that's like a little piece of joy. You get your first published
I was over the moon. I was thrilled. I thought this is the gateway. I'm just here it is. This is what I thought I'd get 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, is just jump right into Marvel and I'll be like Rob Liefeld and Eric Larson and all those other guys who didn't go to art school, or from what I understand didn't go to art school, and they just got broke into the business and just hit a major publisher and ran with it. Or that's the way I perceived it as a kid. Then I learned about all the random stuff Eric Larson did prior to working at Marvel and DC. It's like, oh, okay. We all do small stuff that leads to the big stuff. Yeah. And I definitely did the small stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that because they only see someone once they hit it big or whatever. Yeah. I think that's pretty classic all the way around. And no matter who it is, whenever I think, oh man, they appeared out of nowhere, I'll talk to them later and I find out, oh no, they've been stumping it for years. They've been slowly plugging away, and you just don't perceive it. It's just, you're just not aware. Absolutely. So you finish up art school, and then where were you focusing? Were you just sending applications to Marvel, or were you putting stuff out? Like, were you sending samples in the mail or only in-person stuff?
I moved to Pennsylvania after I graduated art school because my family had moved there, and so I thought, go live with the family, keep expenses low, pay off the student debt, put me closer to New York City, and was able to go to the Big Apple Con January of '93. Nice. Met Fabian Nicieza, who gave me a really cool critique and expressed an interest in my work. He says, "Send me a self-addressed stamped envelope. I'll mail you some scripts so you can do some tryouts." So I thought, oh my goodness, this is great. I can start doing tryouts. And I sent him photocopies. He sent back detailed notes he sent me an X-Men script and issue X-Men 20 or something like that. I drew it all up. My first time to draw a 20-page comic. And he had notes all over. I'm sure I have those somewhere. I sure hope I still have them.
I would love to see that. That is so awesome.
So the next script, I applied all of his notes. So that was some of the best, the earliest comic book training I think I was getting, that like concrete stuff I could use. And in the meantime, in between doing the tryouts for Fabian Nicieza at Marvel, I was mailing out samples to everybody. Marvel, every Image Studio, DC, Valiant, any publisher that was publishing at the time. I was sending stuff out because I wanted to get working as soon as possible.
Of course. And the first breakthrough then was with Rob Liefeld's studio, right?
After doing some small independent comic book stuff. Actually, I was also doing homemade mini comics of my own characters. Like I had done in high school, making my little homemade mini comics. Started doing it again because ash cans were now the thing. Those little photocopied preview mini comics. So I started making mini comics of my own characters and sending them back to my art school buddies who were still in school, who hadn't graduated yet. And a buddy of mine took them to a convention, showed them to Dan Fraga, who worked for Rob Liefeld, and Image was just starting. Fraga liked them, brought him back, showed him to Rob. Rob liked them, and essentially I was now entered into the Extreme Studios talent search, and that's how I was discovered, was off of my mini comics.
Oh wow! And you didn't even submit them; someone else.
I didn't. I told my friend, who actually it was Jaime Mendoza, who is now an inker at DC Comics. He and I went to art school together, and so I credit Jaime as kind of a catalyst to my big break. And then once I was in the studio, he came out, spent a week with me, got to go around the studio, get training from Danny Mickey, Norm Ratman, and then like 3 months later at a Dallas Con, Rob hired Jaime. So we kind of helped get each other into the biz.
That's awesome.
But, he betrayed me and chose to show those mini comics when I said, don't ever show these, because I was so embarrassed. But the big thing I learned there, all my samples, I was getting rejection letters. I saved every rejection letter as a badge of honor. Even my samples to Extreme Studios that I had officially entered into the talent search, rejection letter. But when I got hired off my mini comics, that was the first lesson I think I learned was the samples I was doing what I thought they wanted to see. The publisher or editor wanted to see. Trying to be the style flavor of the month. I can be like you, Rob. I can be like you, Jim. I can be like you, Mark Silvestri. I can be like everyone at Marvel. And I was getting rejection letters, but my mini comics was solely, I'm doing this for me, and I'm doing it for the pure fun and joy of creating. And I think that is what was shining through, and Rob saw something there that he was willing to invest in. So that was the first thing, is like, don't try to be someone else, just be yourself. Still a lesson it took me another 20 years to really get a better hold of, but at least it was a germ in my mind that I could at least wrestle against whenever I felt like, I don't feel good about my work, so I'll write someone else's.
A lot of creative people do that. They are looking for the new trend, or same thing with writing. They're trying to write the story that they think is going to be popular or is going to be poignant. And it's like, do you actually care? There's some level where you can tell their heart's not in it. They're not putting themselves into it. The joy isn't there. Like you said, it's just sort of this weird mechanical process. And even if it's pretty good, there's this kind of Frankenstein monster quality of you're trying to take what everyone else is doing rather than what you actually care about. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is a really good piece of advice, and I think really relevant. And so you get hired. Are you staying in Pennsylvania, or no, you go out to the studio?
I move out. I got hired, so I got discovered in January of 1994, and I moved out to California in April of '94. So it was about 3.5 months. I mean, I started doing pinups for Rob. He had a series ready for me for when I got there to work in studio. I definitely wanted to be in studio because reading, the Image little news magazine with the articles and interviews about all the creators they were hiring, like J. Scott Campbell or Michael Turner or David Finch. It's like Murat Michaels and stuff like that. It's like, I want to be like these guys. I want to be in the studio and learn from, I want to be a part of that energy. I don't want to be just sequestered out here in Pennsylvania, drawing my comics and FedExing them. I want to be in the thick of it, especially with Image being such a, explosive juggernaut right out of the gate.
Right. Awesome. So you move out there and you start going into the studio, 5, 6, 7 days a week, I assume? It's just like crazy
pretty much 5 days a week. And then I would work on pages on the weekend at my at home. Yeah.
Nice.
I was a machine.
And that first series you did was
Bad Rock and Company.
And that's a mini series. It's like a
6-issue mini. Yeah.
So you
kind of like Rob's version of Marvel Team Up. It's Bad Rock and another character from one of the Image founders' line of characters.
Right. And so up till that point, how many sequential pages do you think you've done approximately? And now you're doing suddenly a 6-issue mini.
Right. I'd done 3 tryouts for Fabian. And once I got hired by Rob, I kind of just let the Marvel stuff kind of just fade. It's like, I got a full-time gig here. I'm going to go with that because the Marvel stuff it hasn't clicked yet. I got to go where I'm being hired. So and Fabian totally understood. So I'd done 3 of those tryouts. I did 3 issues of an indie series. 1 issue only ever came out. So I'd done another 3. So I'd done like 120 pages of sequentials, plus all my mini comics I'd made. I'd made like 6 or 8 mini comics, and those were at least 8-page stories.
So you've got a nice solid output. Are you able to do a page a day at that point? Are you on a good schedule?
my very first Dallas convention I went to at age 18 after I graduated high school, I was asking questions of anyone I could, who was seated behind a table, any pro that I could ask questions of. And I was also kind of eavesdropping on conversations. It sounded like people were talking industry stuff. If I'm waiting in line to get an autograph from Carrie Gamble, it's like, well, what are they talking about over there? So I overheard someone say, John Byrne says the Marvel rule is 2 pages a day. So I took that as gospel, and it's like, okay, I know what I need to do. If that's what John Byrne says, he's big time. I want to be big time. I do what John Byrne do. So I started to teach myself right at the beginning
Oh
to
my
do
gosh.
two
So you
pages
were
a
doing
day.
2 pages a day when you went to Rob's studio?
Yeah, and Rob was not expecting that, and he
Were
was
you
like,
the fastest person at the studio at that point? I was gonna say.
yeah, I was doing 10 pages a week at least, where other guys were doing
So
maybe
that's funny
five.
because I was doing a little bit of research and I noticed that you had right at the same time you had Bad Rock and Company come out. You started doing, I think you did like issue 7 or 8 of Newman, and I was like, he can't be doing both of those at the same time. And now
And
you're
Team
doing both.
Youngblood.
Oh my God! So you're doing
Actually,
3 books simultaneously?
only one issue of Bad Rock overlapped with those, with me taking over Team Youngblood and Newman. And I only took over Team Youngblood for maybe 2 or 3 issues when I was like, hey, I started to get burnt out because they were giving me late books.
Sure.
And so I started, as like, I was getting burnout at age 23. So I'm like, hey, Rob, can I just focus on Newman? Because this is the
Right.
book I really like a lot and I'm passionate about. So, because I was taking over for Jeff Matsuda when I took over with issue 7. It's like, this is the one I really want to focus on. Because I realized I'm drawing so fast that I'm not aware of the mistakes I'm making,
Yeah.
and I'm not
Yeah.
taking the time to really savor drawing the comic. So with issue 11 of Newman is where I was really able to really focus in on it and enjoy the meal instead of just scarfing it down and what's
Sure.
like, okay, what can I eat next? It's like, I
Right,
really
right,
want to
right.
savor the flavors.
Yeah, that's one of those dangers of when you're really fast or when you're a fill-in artist. It can be tough to get, like, you become the cleanup crew instead of being the person that someone thinks of first. That's good you were able to pivot, because I know a lot of times people will get in this position where they sort of just get known for like, oh, this is who we call when the fire's, roaring, and they'll put it out. And you're like, you know what I'd love to do? Not be the firefighter. Like, I've now
Yeah.
proven myself. How about we do like good stuff on a good deadline with proper schedule? And
Yeah.
they're sort of like, really? But there's a fire over here. You're like, yeah, that's not what I want to be for the rest of my days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally. Cool. So you how long were you at the Extreme Studio?
Just over 2 years.
Yeah.
In '96, Rob shut Extreme Studios down and moved on to do other stuff. So
Right.
I was kind of now free. Oh, I was always free to work anywhere else. I wasn't contractually obligated. I didn't sign a
Okay.
contract or an exclusivity with Rob. But it's like, hey, I'm working for you, and I
Sure.
love the books we're doing. So let's ride this train for as long as we can. And that ended August of '96. And then I started looking to break in at Marvel and DC. I kind of felt like I was at square one again because I had no contacts at Marvel or DC. So it took about 10 months before I really kind of got locked in. And that was it.
Nice.
I started with at DC in '97.
And so was that through just sending samples to an editor? Was that meeting with someone at a con, or?
I was mailing them out. I was mailing out samples, and it was slow going for me. It was almost kind of a depression sort of time I was in.
Oh, sure. You were at this high, you were doing, producing, and then all of a sudden it just stops. That's gotta feel
Right.
strange. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt strange. It's like I felt alone. I felt like kind of a cast adrift. I was excited about the potential of what I could do, but the reality of it is like, this is the hard slog again.
Right.
And I started sending in samples. Fortunately, I had some good nibbles. Mike Carlin at DC would take the time to write me back with every self-addressed stamped envelope I sent with the samples and said,
Nice.
I like your stuff, just don't have anything for you, hang on. But it was kind of hard to hang on. I'm still in my early mid-20s. It's like, I want it now. Let's go now. I'm ready now.
Yeah.
Give me something now. And but it was hard for me to do samples. It took me a week to do one page.
Oh, wow.
So I was doing a sample set once a month for Marvel, and then the next month I'd try one for DC, and just kind of bounced between those two, and got really it got really dark for me at one point. And I looked into animation and realized I don't want to do animation.
Right.
I'm not ready for that. I love comic books. This is what I want to do. I got to take one more shot. San Diego's Comic-Con's coming up in 2 months. If I don't make a contact there, then I'll consider my time in comics, a closed door. I'll look into animation. I'll look into flipping burgers at In-N-Out. I'll look into graphic design. I'll do something else. And I'll just be thankful for the 2 years that I did get, considering there are artists out there that get 0 years to do this. So, hey, 2 years, that's not everyone gets to play in this ballpark. And at least I got to have a few innings. 2 weeks before the San Diego Comic-Con, Casey Carlson, editor of Legion of Superheroes, calls me up and said, Carlin dropped your samples on my desk. He told me to give you some work. So you want to draw some Legion? And started with some pinups and then a fill-in issue. And so I go to San Diego Comic-Con, and a lot of the stress is taken off because I already have contacts at DC, 2 or 3 editors that I'm now working with. And I don't have to, like, desperately get that contact to,
Right. Do you remember your first issue of Legion?
Legionnaires 56, a
Nice.
Mon-El story. Mon-El
Awesome.
versus the Khund.
Awesome. And so then that just turns into regular work at DC, basically after San Diego?
Yeah, actually at San Diego, I found out I was being considered for a series. Kind of an editor noticed my name badge. I was walking by the DC booth. He noticed my name badge. He goes, "Hey, Todd, come here." I'm like, you know? He goes, "I can't say much. I shouldn't be saying this now, but your samples are on on this one project. You're one of 5 artists being considered for this project." He goes, "Don't say anything. Just know you could be launching a new project possibly if things work out." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll be cool. I'll be cool." And a month or two later, I come to find out it's going to be Young Justice, and I'm one of 5 artists they're considering for Young Justice.
And obviously that ends up going forward. And you did almost every issue of Young Justice, if not all?
I did 53 of the 55 issues, plus some special issues, 3 of those being double-sized. It's like Sins of Youth or Worlds at War, Young Justice specials. So I did. Yeah, I love that book.
And month out.
Yeah. And I loved it. I love that book. I love those characters. If they hadn't ended it to relaunch as Teen Titans to coincide with a cartoon there in 2003, I would have kept rolling there on Young Justice. Loved working with Peter David. Loved those characters, and could have just stayed there for another.
Like those kinds of runs just don't seem to happen very much anymore. You know what I mean? That kind of consistency from issue to issue and storyline to storyline, that you can read such a huge block of material and just see the characters evolve. So how long does that's got to be? I'm just sort of counting out the months there. That's like 4 years, more than 4 years.
Just over 4, just shy of 5 years. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I started in late 97, or actually technically I started January 98 with Young Justice: The Secret from the Girl Frenzy 5th week special, and worked on that till November of 2002.
Amazing. That is a killer run. That is awesome stuff. And obviously then secures you in terms of your style, your growth, and your storytelling. So what did you learn on that big run? Like what kind of, beyond just the sheer amount of consistency, being able to produce month in and month out, you must have been seeing your skills grow in terms of storytelling or things like that.
When we first started the series, Peter David was writing Marvel style. So I was getting the basic plot breakdown, and I got to really kind of figure out how to tell the story. And then Peter would come in and script whatever I drew. And then after Sins of Youth, because we were a little bit behind after doing 2 double-sized specials, Peter switched to writing full script because I was actually faster for him in the long term. So then I switched to working full script. And I kind of, the way I would approach the page kind of evolved. I first started with doing little tiny layouts that I'd blow up on a Xerox machine or copy machine, take to the light box, transfer onto the board, then render that out. Then I decided, like with issue 5 or 6, I'm going to go Jack Kirby style. I'm going to start in this corner and end in that corner. Just start drawing. Wow. And I found that to be more freeing for me. It's like I'm not so relegated to do the layout, transfer it to the board, which was very Extreme Studio style. That's what we all did at Extreme because, we kind of learned from Rob. And so switching to a Jack Kirby style of drawing, I do a quick little thumbnail sketch to show the editor, but then I just dive into the page and just start fitting everything together without having transferred that layout onto the board with my light blue pencil. So gosh, that was so long ago. That was 19 years ago we wrapped that series. So I really focused on a lot of it was fighting off that. I think the really big thing for me was fighting off that you're not quite good enough. Look at how everyone's better than you. Learn from them. Take what they're doing and apply it to your work, because that's what's going to keep you, marketable or desirable to the fans. And so I was really kind of battling that. And the more I battled against that, I think I started to find more of my voice and how I wanted to draw things. So and letting the storytelling become my own rather than, okay, how did any artist, how did they structure their establishing shot to the talking head to the action scene? It's like, yeah, that's ingrained already. Don't have to focus on that, like trying to see how did Jim Lee do it or how did Mark Silvestri do it? Just how am I going to do it? It's already all in here. I don't have to keep looking at issues of whatever of my favorite comics to see.
Right.
I need inspiration. No, it's already inside you. trust yourself and run with it. So I think the biggest thing that I carried with me out of the Extreme Studios was the big character shot.
Right.
You know, that big money shot of the character that, you know, you open the page and there's your big shot of whoever the star of the book is. So I think that's something I've carried with me and still kind of continue to carry with me. Because as an artist, I love opening a comic and seeing a nice big, you know, hero shot of that character. And what leads to that or what takes away from that. So not just having a big shot of the character for pinup's sake, but really how does it fit into the story and can wow the reader, but still move them along with the emotion or the gravitas of the situation or the theme or mood.
And either open big or build up to that big moment that someone's just going to get wowed. Yeah, totally. I feel like, you know, a lot of times people will, you know, the 90s have got a lot of people associate a lot of negative kind of art elements to it or the excesses of the period. But I feel like there's also a dynamic quality and a really exciting quality that was grabbing people's attention for a very good reason, right? And so it's just about trying to not lose that core storytelling, but still be able to build that kind of excitement and punctuate those moments in those dynamic kind of ways. And that's one of the things I really do love about your stuff. When I look at the core storytelling, I can see those elements there, but you're not afraid to kind of blow out a big scene or, you know, a big moment or big action. That's what I think is so awesome about what you've been doing. So we don't have to go through every single project, but I'm sure because you've done so much awesome stuff. But what are some other highlights coming out of Young Justice with such a long, you know, run on that series? You obviously have done a lot of other things, but nothing quite as extensive as that in terms of a single run. Yeah.
Right. I think right after I finished Young Justice, I did my creator-owned thing. My comic books, the mini comics I made in art school, my Wild Guard mini comics. Yep. It's like I'm going to bring that to Image. So that was fun to write and draw, and I learned a lot about writing from my time working with Peter David for 5 years, and how he would write. I kind of just. It's like, well, what would Peter David do? And of course, my writing is nowhere near what Peter David can do.
Yeah, but you're still taken through osmosis and learning certain elements. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the thing I loved about him is that every issue of Young Justice is every 3 pages we would change to another scene. He'd split the team up all over the place, and we'd cut to, what is Robin doing? Oh, but now Superboy and Wonder Girl over here, but we have Impulse over here. So we were just bouncing, and it always kept it fresh for me because I never got stagnant drawing the same character for like 11, 12 pages. It was doing this one thing or one locale. It was always fresh for me. So it's like, okay, with Wild Guard, I've got all these heroes. What's Red Rover doing over here? Now I got it covered to Ignacia, but then we have to get to the producers and this, that. So I was bouncing all around, and Eric Stevenson, who was editor at Extreme Studios and the writer of New Men.
Right.
Now, I think he's the publisher at Image Comics.
At that time, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he is still, yeah.
He still is now, yeah. He said, when I was feeling insecure about writing, he said, well, can you write a 1 or 2 page scene? I'm like, yeah. He goes, just write that scene and then write another scene to follow that and just keep doing that. So between what I learned with Peter David and what Eric Stevenson has said, you know, just at least do that and the story will build. I just kind of went into it. And so creating your own characters and, you know, is just, you know, even drawing Spider-Man and Young Justice, super special for me. And I love doing it. And I still do it now, but also creating your own stuff. It's like, it's a deeper level of that personal aspect to it, because it's 100% from you.
Exactly. When someone brings me one of my creator-owned books, I'm sure you feel the same way, and they say, you know, this is one of my favorite books, or I love this one, and you know it would not exist without your, you know, input, right? Like, no offense, I love working on Avengers and Conan and all those other things, but it's like those characters have existed before me and they'll exist after me, and my time on them is very special to me, but your fandom is not wrapped up in my input necessarily on it. You know what I mean? It's a bigger thing. Whereas this is like, oh, you like one of my books? Like, this is exactly what I wanted it to be, or this is what, you know, you saw what I love about this thing. That is so special. And so that I totally agree with you there. It's amazing. So you did Wild Guard at Image, and that was just a mini series rather than an
Yes, it was a 6-issue mini series, and they said, you know, this first issue did great sales. I think we sold 20,000 copies, which was
at the time,
decent for the time.
Super sharp.
And Steven said, would you consider making this an ongoing? And I wasn't ready to pull that trigger because I was already I mean, it's still kind of self-publishing. I was having to pay for my inker and my colorist, and it's like, I'm running out of money fast because, I started, 9 months before it saw print. So it's like, I don't know if I could financially stay afloat as writer and artist.
Sure.
So it's like, I think I just need to let it be a miniseries. Then I'll do another one-shot miniseries. So I did some subsequent one-shots and shorter miniseries to follow. So I did technically another 6 issues after that first miniseries between 2005 and 2009. I was also working on the Teen Titans Go comic based on the original Teen Titans cartoon, which was easy to draw in that animated style, helped me build the funds back up from working on, trying to produce Wild Guard. So that was kind of a saving grace there because I could easily turn out an issue drawing in that Glenn Murakami style. And then from there, a door opened up at Marvel to work on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man with Peter David, because Mike Wieringo was leaving the book. Peter David says, hey, I want you to follow Mike Wieringo if you're available or interested. It's like, absolutely. I love Mike Wieringo's work. Huge fan.
Spider-Man, yeah.
And plus, I'm getting to draw Spider-Man, and then that's where I really got kind of locked in on the map with Marvel. Like, I was kind of not quite on their radar till then. They weren't quite sure if I would be a good fit. But Peter said, no, you need to give Todd a try. So I did some, just kind of some sketches. Like, here's some Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Mary Jane sketches. They like, cool. We have a 2-issue Mysterio story arc for you. It's like, great, 2 issues. Let's do this.
Right.
Halfway through it, you know what? We're bumping that to 3 issues. It's like, sweet. And then they said, while I'm finishing that, they go, we have another artist doing a 3-issue story arc, but will you come back for another issue of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? I'm like, sure. That ended up being another 7 issues to close out the series before Brand New Day. So, and by that point, I was kind of on the Marvel editor radar and started doing all sorts of stuff from then on out, from 2007 to pretty much present day.
Yeah. So, and then you've never been on an exclusive? You've always just been project to project?
Yep, my entire career. Yeah.
Wow. Nice. And yet good though, because obviously it frees you up to do kind of whatever you want on that front, which is awesome. And so you've done just a plethora of stuff, and you've been obviously done a slew of covers. You're kind of all over. I know you did some X-Men stuff. You did the Nightcrawler series.
Nightcrawler series with Chris Claremont. Oh my gosh. That was, as an X-Men fan, that was Nightcrawler, one of my favorite X-Men. And then getting to work with Chris Claremont, it was like I was nervous. Like the 14-year-old in me showed up for work every day for the first 6 issues. It's like, we're working with a Chris, and he wrote Marvel style.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, Chris Claremont scripts, those must be very dense. And I'm like, we're working Marvel style, and I've got all this room to play. And my editor, oh man, my editor at the time, Daniel Ketchum, who was editing that book, kept pushing me. I turned in my layouts. He'd take the time to call me up and walk me through them. He goes, Todd, give me more. Give me more. Don't just draw what Chris has written on the page. You know these characters. You know how Nightcrawler and Storm are going to interact. Give me more. It's like, I'm free to give you more. I can take this story and go further with it, like extrapolate it out. He goes, I want more. And it's like, so that pushed me. That was probably the greatest push I got as a visual storyteller, was from Daniel saying, don't just draw what's on what the words are on the PDF I sent you. Give me more. Challenge Chris in his dialoguing. And so I would just go nuts, and I'd send in my layouts with sample dialogue. I'd type out sample dialogue just so that Chris could have an idea of where I was coming from. He never used any of my dialogue. Never did I expect him to, until the last thing Nightcrawler says on the last page of the last issue. He took one of the lines and used it in there. Amazing. And so that was really fun. It's like, he used my line. Oh my gosh. But there was this one, like an example of the storytelling I got to really get in there and I was like, problem solve was Nightcrawler and Colossus in the danger room working out, and Colossus knocks out Nightcrawler, and then Nightcrawler has this vision of another character somewhere, and there's a problem going on. I'm like, okay, Chris didn't explain how this is going to happen. I get to decide. So I thought, well, I can't have Colossus, they can't be duking it out, sparring, because Colossus would kill Nightcrawler with a metal fist to Nightcrawler's head. That would, smash it. That can't happen. Dodgeball. He's throwing like volleyballs, because it's just hard enough to knock you out, but not hard enough to kill you. It's not so soft as like like a actual dodgeball, which would just pang off your head, and that's not gonna. It's like need something a little meatier, and it's like okay. So I came up with this whole little sequence. I choreographed it the way I wanted, and the number of panels and the cuts here and there. I think that was issue 8 or 9, I want to say. And Nightcrawler gets knocked out, and Colossus and Psylocke come running up, and Nightcrawler's having his vision, and it's like, this was fun. I got to tell. I had a germ that I got to spread out to really make that story, the scene, the story I thought it could be.
Sure, that's awesome. That and your enthusiasm is infectious here. I love this stuff. I'm really excited because I'm going to show, of course, all that artwork at the exact same point here, so people are seeing that sequence. It's amazing stuff, Todd. You've got such a depth and breadth, and the experiences that you've had. You've been able to, there's not a lot of people that I think have done so much work for Image and DC and Marvel kind of back to back to back like that on those kinds of extensive runs. And you've been able to really establish a look now that is your own, and the kind of hallmarks of, there are a handful of artists, and it's funny you mentioned that you follow Waringo on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, because I see some similarities in terms of there's a joy in the superhero form and the characters. There's a lightness and a purity to the characters that Waringo has, that you have in your work that always stands out to me and that I really love. Like, don't get me wrong, the grim and gritty stuff is great and can be really cool and atmospheric, and the hatching and all that kind of thing. But there's something really joyous about this nice, that kind of clean storytelling, and it really does harken back to what you're saying, like about Rick Leonardi's stuff. You know what I mean? That iconic kind of look and those simple, clean shapes that jump out. And that stuff always stands out for me about your works, it's a joy to look at, and seeing your confidence, like you bust this stuff out now. I was looking at your YouTube channel, and you've got these wonderful sketches. You're doing live sketches all the time. You're doing inks and everything else. And that kind of training, we were talking before about people didn't have the internet at their disposal. This stuff is invaluable. Just watching someone else draw in real time, that problem solving, exactly what you were talking about before, how they see the figure, how they see the page, how they see, shadows and textures and anatomy, and being able to watch them do it and then go, oh, a little light bulb goes off. Like, oh, I was close, but not, that makes more sense. Or look at those consistent choices. I feel like that's so invaluable for people to be able to access. And you're always so giving. You're constantly streaming. You're having great conversations with your fans. You're engaging with them. But I see that at the conventions as well, when you're doing sketches for people and doing commissions and all that kind of stuff. Before we got on the call, you were saying how you were feeling kind of introverted because of pandemic stuff. But I've always, I've seen you out there being super social, and I see you online being super social. So I don't know, maybe that's just your perception on it, but I feel like that hasn't been quite a problem as much as you might think. So
maybe not. On the Myers-Briggs, I kind of test right there on the cusp between introvert and extrovert. So sure. I kind of like, I'm extroverted to a point where it's like, okay, I'm charged up enough on being social. I need to be, by myself for a while. Right. Whenever my wife and I when Don and I go to New York Comic Con, that's like, we usually go out there for like about a week or so, not just the convention itself, but extra time to stop by the Marvel offices or see friends who live out there in New York. When I come home, it's like, both of us are like, we are like socially spent. San Diego and New York, long cons, so much social energy going out. When we get home, we want to recharge just by being alone. And it's times like, Dawn, I don't even want to see you right now.
Right.
Let me go to the draft.
I mean, the act of creation is a solitary kind of thing in this industry, right? Do you find when you're drawing, if you're not streaming or something like that, do you have music going? Are you watching, have you got TV in the background, or are you kind of just quiet on the page? What's your sort of approach?
I like to have something on to listen to occupy the other side of my brain. So usually it's streaming some sort of TV show, or occasionally music, occasionally a podcast, but most of the time it's a TV show. Yeah. Usually something I've already seen before, so I don't have to actually look up and watch it. So, old sitcoms, Office, I'll listen to The Office. I don't know how many times I've been through The Office, Parks and Rec. Nice. The Goldbergs are my new jam now, but also stories like UFO or cryptid conspiracy type shows, Monster Quest or true crime like Dateline, something like that. Something that tells a story where I don't have to look up unsolved mysteries. I've been through the Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries a dozen times. It's just because it's like I've seen it, I've listened to it so many times. It's my best show to do layouts to because I don't have to think about it at all. It's like, Robert Stack, you tell me a story, I'm going to try to figure out this puzzle, and I don't care what you say because I've already heard you say it a dozen times. That's but amazing. I just need something going on in the background that doesn't require anything of me. And
it's so different on the writing front, right? Because when I'm writing a script, I don't want any noise. I don't want any, I'm just trying to focus on the story and the voices and the things. So it's like this very weird, quiet thing. Sometimes Stacy, my wife, will pop by and she's like, "Are you all good?" I'm like, "Yep." She's like, "Okay." I didn't hear anything, just like the occasional little clack of the keyboard and then long stretches of silence. I'm like problem solving or trying to figure a scene out or whatever. It's such a different thing. So many of the artists, they're like, "Oh yeah, I go through whole seasons of shows." I'm like, I don't watch TV. I don't have time. So it's just a very different kind of an element there. So totally. You're looking back now at, like you said, 27 years in the industry, incredible amount of growth. What are you working on currently? What is your current project, if it's been announced?
The one project that I'm like, most of my focus is going into right now hasn't been announced. It probably won't be out till next year, so I can't really say anything just yet, but it's a lot of fun. I am so excited for this project. I'm getting to create all sorts of new characters, heroes, villains, and stuff. So I am so psyched to work on this project. I am really excited about it. I can't wait for it to be announced, and I can't wait for it to hit the shelves because I'm just totally amped about it. Right now, doing, along with that, things I can't talk about, a bunch of covers.
Right.
Doing more of my headshot covers for Marvel, working on one right now today. So so a lot of covers for Marvel and then this other project that is yet to be announced.
Awesome. I'm so it's just always, like I said, a thrill to be able to see you and to see the work growing and all that kind of stuff. If you were looking back, well, I mean, as you are looking back now at your career and stuff like that, what do you feel like you would tell new creators, or what kind of things did you feel like maybe you had to learn the hard way that you would advise people now in terms of getting their start or drawing or storytelling or any of those kinds of things?
I think I'm thankful for the lessons I have learned, because I think I've learned some really good lessons early on that I still have to apply the lesson, because it's easy to default into anything negative. Right. I think as humans, that's so easy for us. So the one, be myself in my art. Don't try to ride on the cusp of the hot flavor of the moment. It's okay to learn from it, but but it's like, there's two ways of thinking. Am I going to be inspired and challenged to raise my art to another level? Or am I going to take it negatively and have it just kill the joy, kill the fun? Or I'll just try to do what they're doing. Right. In this kind of hurried, frantic, it's like, I got to do this to be liked. It's like, it's so hard, I think, to be yourself, whether it's in art or anything in life, to say, this is who I am, because there's that fear of rejection. And I carried that fear of rejection. I can still carry that fear of rejection. And I have to catch myself because, exactly. But it's so easy when we're kind of caught up in our own head without community to talk. It's like, oh, this is the thing I struggle with. And then you say, yeah, me too. It's like, oh, I'm not alone. Jim and I are very similar because we're both human beings. But when we're by ourselves in those quiet moments and the dark night of the soul, it's so easy to go, I suck. I'm terrible. My career is about to end, and I'll never be hired. I'll be forgotten. I won't even be a footnote in the industry. It's so easy to slip into that. I can slip into that thinking even today. Nowadays. And it's like, no, I got to take that thought captive. And it's like, I have fun, bring the fun, and the rest will fall in stride. The readers will read, the editors will give assignments. Just each project, savor it for what it is. Not being afraid of what's going to come next, because that was the thing I struggled with at the beginning. Yeah,
I think we all go through those periods, particularly when you don't have a long-term project. You go through these real periods of like, yeah, but what's next? Yeah, but this is wrapping up, and what have I, that fear that if you're not on the stands for a couple months, you're gone, you're vanished, you're off the board or whatever. And I've had this summer, I wrapped up some big project stuff, and I thought, you start to get that weird fear kind of climbing up. Maybe this is the last one I do. Maybe this is the, and then all of a sudden a week later, people are calling you or things are happening or someone's asking you about a thing and you go, what was I right? Okay, just do the work. The work is there. You're established. It's possible. Just keep plugging away at the stuff. Absolutely. What other kind of things in terms of drawing or anything else?
Yeah, another thing is, and this is what I've kind of learned while having done my YouTube channel and my live streams and talking to fans at conventions or interactions on social media, is that it's so easy for our perceptions of what a professional artist is or does can be so skewed when we're starting out. When I was a kid, I thought every line has to be perfect every time they put it on the page because it looks perfect to me as a kid or as a young fan. But knowing that it's a slog. There are ups and downs. Sometimes you can just nail that shot of Spidey, and sometimes you spend 8 hours trying to figure out how to get that leg to fit on there correctly. And that's okay. It's okay to struggle with the challenge. So let yourself struggle with the challenge. That's an opportunity to learn and grow. Anything that feels like a challenge, and like me learning how to draw the human head as a kid, so that I can move away from just riding the crutch of Ninja Turtles, which I believe are awesome, and I hope to get to do a Ninja Turtle again someday, or get to do a Ninja Turtle for the first time someday.
Right.
But not just solely focusing on funny animal stuff, but pushing through the challenge to reach that next level, because these levels are going to, accrue over time. But you have to get in there, get your hands dirty. And advice my dad gave me at the when I was a teenager, I carry to this day, and I share it all the time, is the only failure is not trying.
Right.
He goes, don't get to the end of your life and wonder, what if I had only given it a shot? He goes, you're young, you got the energy. If it doesn't work out, if your dream doesn't work out, because your dream, Todd, may not work out, that's okay. You course correct, you do whatever you need to do to survive. Right. Take whatever job you need to. So when I was in that time after Extreme Studios shut down and I was like having to find my way back into the industry at either Marvel or DC, it's like, just keep trying. It's hard. It's difficult. I'm feeling all these negative emotions. That's okay. Just keep slogging. Keep punching. Just, I'm bleary-eyed and bleeding. It's like, it's okay. I'll get through this. And hopefully I'll be maybe a little bit of a stronger artist. Maybe I'll have learned something and I'll be just a little bit better. And I think that's how we get better, is just oftentimes just baby steps of getting better. Occasionally the giant leap, but more often than not, it's going to be those little steps that accrue that make the journey long.
Yeah. And I think it's also the kind of thing where you feel like if you set your goals and you say, if I never get to do fill in the blank, the dream or whatever, then it's not good enough. And it's like, look, having those aspirations is really important and having goals to set to move forward. But on the way, you need to also kind of savor the opportunities and the things that are happening around you. Like when I, the times when I felt like, even though I was working on stuff that was cool, I was so busy looking past it and going, but what if it was something bigger? Or what if I was doing something over there? That grass is greener kind of syndrome, and going, look, having those goals is awesome, but what's also awesome? This here right now. Like, don't savor some of that. You know what I mean? Savor those kinds of aspects. Conventions were something where at first I was so starstruck to be there and to be involved in the comic industry. And then you hit a weird period of like, oh God, it's a slog. It's so much work. And then all of a sudden you kind of dip out and you suddenly come back up and you go, wait a minute, I love this stuff. And I love these people and I love having these interactions. Remember that, because even when it's hard, it's still not all bad. It's still really good in a lot of ways. I think one of the things that is a lot of us are realizing is that we took a bunch of that stuff for granted. I got to tell you, when conventions really do finally come back, I know I certainly won't take the travel for granted. I won't take the community for granted. And friendships that I've made along the way. You know what I mean? It is a really amazing thing to be part and parcel of, and to build up that kind of convention family, the people you see on the road show after show and year after year, and you realize, oh, we're all in it for the long haul. We're all doing this thing, because we all started when we were 5 years old, of course.
That's right. Of course.
Right. Amazing, man. It's so good to talk to you just in general, and then to sort of frame this, because there's things I knew about your career from afar, or I saw in your art, and I love talking to you about it. I love kind of getting beneath the surface and finding out more about how those things kind of clicked, or how some of those connections came together. It is amazing. I think it's really good advice for other people, and the commonalities that we see. I've done a bunch of these interviews, and you start to see everyone's career is different, and the path they're on is different, and the timeline's different, and the projects are different. But the certain, the things that seem to stick are the tenacity, you know what I mean? The passion for this stuff, the year after year trying different things and plugging away and realizing that you've still got more to climb, that we've all got those kind of fears and neuroses about where we're at. A lot of people would look and they would say, well, of course you're so well established, you've got such a body of work, you're not worried about this stuff. You're like, everyone worries, everyone has fears, and wonders whether or not they're going to be able to keep doing it, or today's a bad day and you're not feeling it. So it's cool to hear that even from someone as far along the path as you. So it's been a pleasure. I'm glad we were able to do this.
Same here, Jim. Absolutely, always great to chat with you.